Al Gore is a box office smash, and George Clooney and Julia Roberts are pushing sustainability on the cover of Vanity Fair. Net zero homes, like the ones behind me, are being built in a subdivision here in Milton, Ontario, and even Walmart is going green. Once a dreary subject, the environment is now a cause célèbre. This episode of Backspace examines how green has gone mainstream.
The scientific consensus is that we are causing global warming. Temperature increases are taking place all over the world, and that's causing stronger storms.
This is the biggest crisis in the history of this country.
Early this morning, Hurricane Katrina slammed into New Orleans.
These are the hurricane force winds.
We're seeing flooding, we're seeing hurricanes, we're seeing increases in natural disasters, and we're not set up to deal with it.
I think what has happened in the last few years, and especially in 2005, is that there was a recognition that we may actually be fairly close to a point of irreversibility. In fact, it looks, according to some research, that within 10 years we may be at a point where it's too late to do anything because there's so much momentum behind the climate.
We're hearing over and over and over from the leading scientists of the world, not crazy environmentalists like me. The leading scientists of the world are telling us that we're in deep trouble.
The fact that the Arctic ice cap is melting away at the rate of 8% per year should be headline news. These are enormous scale changes to our planet that you can see from outer space. The fact that there will be no more polar bears in perhaps 20, 25 years' time should be headline news. People are now seeing the consequences. I mean, that species, the polar bear, that's sort of the symbol of, for me, Arctic Canada, is absolutely on the brink. We've seen reproductive rates plummet. We've seen animals losing body mass. We've now seen polar bears drowning for the first time. And that's just one species.
What we know is that the temperature on our planet has risen 1 degree. And in that time period that the temperature has risen 1 degree, we've seen natural disasters and hurricanes, for example, double in their frequency and double in their impacts and length. So what does that actually mean? Well, we all saw it last year when Katrina and then Rita ripped across the Gulf and tore up New Orleans. And we saw one of the world's largest superpowers scrambling to deal with 1 million environmental refugees. The United States couldn't handle it.
Well, it's not just poor people, it's people who thought that this thing would last 2 days, and now their houses are gone. They have nothing to go back to.
This is our telethon. These are our people. We got to hit these phones. We got to take care of our people.
The United Nations is saying that we can expect 50 million environmental refugees, 50 Katrinas, and that's only one of the impacts of climate change.
It's a foul-smelling, toxic soup.
We're experiencing something we haven't experienced over the past 9 to 10 days, the smell of rotting water, and it is permeating the air. It's very thick today.
A lot of climate scientists have been really surprised at how quickly the impacts are occurring as a result of this climate change. Extreme weather events are a great example of that. No one really predicted this extraordinary increase in hurricane intensity we've seen over the last couple of decades. Every time I look at the issue, my belief is confirmed that we need to act sooner rather than later. The carbon dioxide that's being put into the air right now from Alberta tar sands, for example, half of it will still be there in a century's time, and it will act as the new asbestos. To make that tar sands oil into petrol takes a huge amount of energy, and you've got to release 3 times as much pollutant, carbon dioxide, into the atmosphere for every barrel of oil from that source as you do from a standard source.
It's very urgent, sir. Our climate is changing violently, and it's going to happen over the next 6 to 8 weeks.
But you said this wouldn't happen for another 100 years or so.
I am Al Gore. I used to be the next president of the United States of America. If you look at the 10 hottest years ever measured, they've all occurred in the last 14 years. And the hottest of all was 2005. If we listen carefully and clearly to what the scientific community of the entire world is saying, not just saying, they're shouting it now. They're saying, hey, wake up. We're facing a planetary emergency here. And we're not used to hearing phrases or encountering alarming messages like that. We have to tear the mask away. Labeling this a political issue is just another way of saying it's insignificant. This is the most crucial challenge that any of us have ever faced, and it's happening in our lifetimes. The Arctic is experiencing faster melting. If this were to go, sea level worldwide would go up 20 feet. This is what would happen in Florida. Around Shanghai, home to 40 million people. The area around Calcutta, 60 million. Here's Manhattan. The World Trade Center Memorial would be underwater.
With climate change, we're talking about energy production. We're talking about fossil fuels and the carbon dioxide that fossil fuels emit when they're burned. And that is in every aspect of our society. It affects every aspect of our lives, of our industry, of our consumption. It's a much harder problem to solve because everybody's involved. And we all really would like the problem to go away. We're in deep denial about this one because it's so complex and we all have to sacrifice it.
Do we keep doing things that are destructive to Mother Nature? Do we keep doing that when we know we could do something else? Oh, yes.
Stop cutting down trees.
I do think I can see a real groundswell. You know, I see a lot of people shifting and caring about organic food or, you know, organic clothing. Of course, you know, I started all this stuff just to try to compensate for those things that I'm doing to self-destruct.
Some people think that concern about climate change is a bit of a trend, and you see things like movie stars and whatever getting on the bandwagon. I'm not too worried about that, quite frankly, because I'm convinced that just looking at the scientific projections, that this will be the issue of the 21st century.
Coming up next, the Terminator turned governor gets tough on climate change.
We must reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. It is out of control, and we have to, as I have said, our goal is we have to roll it back to the 1990 level.
For decades, corporations have been trying to convince government that the environmental solution was an economic dead end. But now it seems that industry is backing off. Why? Is it looming culpability or just better business?
The control of business by government is called communism. The control of government by business is called fascism. And what we need to do is walk that narrow trail in between, which is free market capitalism and democracy, and keep big government at bay with our right hand, big business at bay with our left. But you know, from the beginning of our history, our greatest political leaders have warned Americans against the domination by corporate power.
This Kennedy has taken the battle from Washington to the public airwaves, partnering with Mike Papantonio, one of the fiercest corporate trial attorneys in America.
The Pap Attack.
Exxon's newest flying monkey has taken the form of an internet video available online through YouTube. The video is a parody of Inconvenient Truth that makes Gore look like a dimwit buffoon for his stand on global warming. But a 17 or 18-year-old surfing the net is going to believe that it's a hip, funny, artistic storyline about global warming. And that internet surfer will never know that its creators are old oil billionaires who could care less whether the next generation boils, burns up, or melts into the sea. The environmentalist can no longer stand around a campfire, join hands, and sing Kumbaya. There can be nothing warm and fuzzy about the way they go after corporate America. They have to go after them the same way that corporate America comes after their children or comes after their rivers and their mountains and their water. Whether it's corporate America, whether it's Canadian corporations, unless you can make these people pay by taking money out of their stockholders' pocket and paying for the damage that they do, you will never have a sustainable environmental movement in this country.
People who control the marketplace today, the oil companies, have a strong incentive to discourage alternatives.
They make too much money with their technological stagnation and the internal combustion engine.
For the last 15 years, they've been telling us the fuel cells are 10 to 15 years old.
There's still roughly 1 trillion barrels worth of oil in the Earth's crust. That's $100 trillion worth of business yet to be done.
When corporations take control of government, they're only run one reason they want it, to plunder. Corporations don't want free markets, and they don't want democracy. They want profits. 63% of corporations in our country pay zero taxes, and that's because of the control of government by corporate power. They want to steal the air, the water, the public lands, make money for themselves by stealing that from the public, contaminating it.
The whole suburban project, I think, can be summarized pretty succinctly as the greatest misallocation of resources in the history of the world. America took all of its post-war wealth and invested it in a living arrangement that has no future.
The end of suburbia examines what happens to the thousands of places known as suburbia when the prime mover behind that energy-intensive lifestyle begins to go into depletion. And the authors of Feeling the Future help discuss what solutions we might come up with.
I think thematically we're completely linked to the end of suburbia because the premise of our book is also that our lifestyle is floated on this kind of cheap oil and cheap gas. And when things get a little more expensive, you got to find better alternatives.
Economics is one of the driving factors that is shattering the world and leading us on this destructive path. Because economists are so disconnected from the earth that when you ask them, where does the ozone layer or topsoil or biodiversity or underground aquifers of water, where does that fit in the economy? You know what they say? That those are externalities. I didn't know what externality meant in economics terms, but that means they're not in the economy. Sorry, what planet are economists living on? No wonder Hazel Henderson says conventional economics is a form of brain damage. These guys think that the economy is built on human creativity and productivity. But everything we use comes out of the earth. And there are enormous repercussions of what we do to the earth. But these guys, these economists, are so loony, they think the economy can grow forever, which it can't. They think it must grow forever. Well, what planet are they on?
The Home Depot has over 1,000 earth-friendly eco-options.
There is no question that corporate social responsibility is growing. Corporations feel vulnerable on environmental issues, and the result is that they care what their consumers think. And so we met with Home Depot, we met with Office Depot, we met with Staples, and initially when we met with some of these companies, they'd say, oh, we're buying sustainable forests, we don't really want to talk to you. And so we ran campaigns against them. We had protests in front of Home Depot. We had 300 protests in front of Staples stores. And now both of those companies have committed to environmental policies where they will not buy from old growth forests that are being destroyed. They want to only buy Forest Stewardship Council certified products, FSC products. So what anyone can do is when they walk into a store, you can say, I want recycled paper. I want certified paper, paper that's certified by or wood that's certified by the Forest Stewardship Council. And so I think it's important that consumers use their capacity to vote at the checkout stand, because if we don't have demand for ecological responsible products, then they're not going to create them.
I think we should be trying to get people to reduce energy consumption, but I think it would be a real mistake to think that that's going to solve the problem. So when it comes to energy efficiency, the kind of policies I tend to favor are again ones that are regulations. For example, a regulation that says that manufacturers can no longer sell you devices that are draining power at your plug when they're not turned on. Like your television, the little clock on your microwave, all of these devices, we're using an amazing amount of electricity and we're not getting any benefit from it. I mean, the only way you solve that is with a regulation, and that's the kind of thing that we need to have.
Believe it or not, some of the toughest legislation on climate change is coming from a high-profile Republican, unafraid to challenge the party line.
We must reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. It is out of control, and we have to, as I've said, our goal is we have to roll it back to the 1990 level. We can do that.
The way we do it is simply get the polluter to pay. You get the polluter to buy a license to pollute. And once you do that, polluters become very ingenious about limiting their pollution. So that's the simple thing. So whether it's a carbon tax or a cap and trade system like Kyoto proposes, we just need a mechanism to make the polluter pay. And once that happens, everything else will fall into place. And the good news is, of course, that electricity is a generic product. You can make it from the wind or from the sun or from nuclear power or from under the earth or whatever. You don't have to burn coal to make it. And the same with transport fuels. You know, you can grow it on a farm. You don't have to dig it out of the ground. And it's the old fossil fuels that are causing all the problem. You know, as we move away from those, we'll start solving the problem and incidentally probably solving a lot of other problems on the way.
We should be supporting corporations who are pursuing solar and wind energy and conservation strategies. And we should definitely not be supporting corporations who are, doing new developments in the tar sands, for example. The rest of the world is looking at Canada and seeing us as, as the next big oil boom. And it's devastating for the fragile ecology of the boreal forests. People look at the tar sands and they think they're a desert, but they're under the forest. You've got to destroy the boreal forest before you even get to tar sands. Our boreal forests actually hold more carbon in them than any other place on Earth. So it's a double whammy for climate change when you cut down the boreal forest and then, start going for the oil. It's a climate change nightmare that's happening in Canada right now.
The court systems in Canada and the U.S. are so dramatically different. You simply can't growl at these people. You have to bite them every now and then. Unfortunately, in Canada, you don't have a tort system that lends itself to that. The court system you have to deal with these people is no longer relevant. It's archaic. Unless you can open the doors to the average person to go into a courtroom and say, look, you've caused harm to my family by polluting my waterways, you've caused my children to become sick, you've destroyed my air, and now I don't want to just fine you. I don't want to have some judge just say, I'm going to slap you on the hand. You have to punish them by taking their money away from them. The only thing that corporate America understands on environmental issues is when you go to their back pocket, you take their money away.
Coming up next, think before you buy, and you can become part of the solution.
By buying it without asking what the repercussions are, you ensure the repercussions continue on.
There's no doubt that real sustainability will require the efforts of both government and big business. But don't underestimate the effect you can have at home while watching this program.
We live in a world in which all these things are happening, but we don't see how it connects to ourselves. So if you go out shopping at Gap or Nike or Roots, you want a garment. I'm sure you don't think, gee, I wonder where the cotton was grown and is it organic? Cotton is one of the most chemically intensive crops we grow. And yet the act of buying has enormous repercussions. By buying it without asking what the repercussions are, you ensure the repercussions continue on.
Going eco-friendly is a lot easier than people think. I think before people thought that to be an environmentalist, you had to move to the woods, stop shaving, and strap yourself to a tree. But now it's a lot easier for the average consumer, the average person to get into it.
Industrial biotechnology is about going out into nature and finding microorganisms that can transform agriculture products into new consumer materials. And they take renewable feedstocks like corn sugar and they transform this sugar into polyesters, which are biodegradable and green. And they're now making fabrics out of this material for a number of applications, including clothing.
All kinds of designers are now coming out with great fabrics that are eco-friendly, like bamboo, which actually feels as soft as a rayon, but it's completely sustainable. All kinds of designers are getting in on soy fabrics as well, and every month there's more announcements about that kind of thing. So it doesn't mean that you have to walk around in a hemp beige sack if you're going to wear environmentally friendly clothes.
There is some dramatic improvements we can make on a technological basis in what is a global energy system dominated by fossil fuels. It's 85% dominated by fossil fuels, and we need to do something quite quickly about greenhouse gas emissions. My research indicates to me that technologically we can do something quite quickly, and that is converting our use of fossil fuels to a zero emission use.
We hear so much about cars. Cars are only part of the problem. Buildings, houses, a lot of things that we do, manufacturing, these are all contributing to the problem. So definitely looking at your house as some place where you can actually reduce the expenditure of energy, and by doing that you're actually cutting down on the emissions that are going into the air.
The change is happening today. It still hasn't occurred, and I think we're right in the middle of a change that's about to happen. And that's what we are experimenting with here. In this particular home, we have a wind turbine on the roof. We have solar panels. We have geothermal heat. We've got pure energy features in this home. We've got bamboo floors, which is resource friendly because it's engineered lumber product. We've got a hot water recovery system, which if you turn right here, as you use warm water, it actually takes that energy, that heat, and puts it back into the home.
What are people saying though? When people that come through, what is their first impression?
They love them. They love the homes. They love the items, and they're having a really good time enjoying the products that we put in front of them to collect data from.
Building these new greenhouses is one approach to trying to save energy and save the world and whatever, but the reality is we have a bunch of existing houses, and how could we take one of these wartime houses and make it into a net zero energy house? We have an organization called Work Worth Doing, and we're designers, and we try to use design to actually make positive change in terms of social or environmental actions.
Some of Lorraine's recommendations include taking a look at your old appliances. Your fridge accounts for about 11% of your home's energy, weighing heavily on both climate change and your pocketbook. Your bathroom can also get you in a lot of environmental hot water. The average person in North America uses about 260 liters a day, 150 liters just from flushing the toilet. Installing water-conserving shower heads and double levers on your toilet can greatly reduce the strain. Finally, don't forget the lighting in your home.
This uses 75% less energy than the incandescent lights. I have some American stats. For example, if there's something like 111 million people in the US, and if everybody replaced just one light bulb with a compact fluorescent, that's the equivalent of being able to provide energy for a city of something like 1.5 million people, or the equivalent, I think they say, of taking 1.3 million cars off the road.
The interesting question, I think, is what is it going to take us to do something? Our species got here because we looked ahead and avoided danger by taking the right choice. Now it's crystal clear we're in deep trouble.
If we regard a 5-bedroom house with 3 bathrooms and a 3-car garage with 3 cars in each slot and annual trips to someplace warm when it's cold as the essentials of a good life, then it's game over for the species on this planet, because we can't do that for 10 billion people.
I think the worst case scenario is going to be that our civilization will become so stressed by the middle of the century that we'll start to see a disintegration of this wonderful global society that we live in. And that'll occur at a time when we've got the most dangerous weapons that humans have ever devised. And you can imagine where rising seas and extreme weather events and other catastrophes are forcing hundreds of millions of people to migrate and relocate, what that might mean for global security. I don't believe there's anyone on this planet who would swap their children's future or jeopardise their children's future just so they can continue driving big cars. I guess I've got faith in humanity that people will change.
We still burn coal to produce the energy we use. Ontario, for example, is looking at putting in new nuclear energy. The grid is already at peak. So if we can look at other things like renewable energies, sun, geothermal, that kind of thing, it could go a long way.